Now we are in center of Brussels. It's a typical Brussels day. There's no sun.
It's very grey. Yeah.
And you made a book called Subjective Atlas of Brussels. I have to show it on the other side. And you have now other city editions. But first, let's talk about this Brussels edition. So basically, I think we all have stories from the cities where we live, and most of the time it's very interesting. But you asked a lot of people to talk about and write about their special city. How the project came out?
Before the Subjective Atlas of Brussels, there were several other subjective atlases. So the concept of the atlas that had been developed before. And then I live in Brussels. I love the city. But then there were the attacks on Zaventem. And so kind of this misconception of Brussels was very strong. All of a sudden the representation of our capital became almost kind of a violent place to be. And myself, I grew up in the Netherlands, and then now I live almost 20 years here. And I'm so surprised meeting people from Flanders who say, oh, I've never been to Brussels, or oh, Brussels is such a dangerous city. So I felt the urge to really have a counter-narrative and a counter-mapping, showing the perspective of the people who live in Brussels, who call it their city and how they perceive it, and to show the variety, the richness, the civility, the livability of Brussels, to have another perspective and to put Brussels on a different way, literally on the map.
If I were you, I would write 200 pages for the book with my favorite places or a lot of subjects. But you only wrote 2, actually. I just checked. You wrote the foreword, which is okay. Of course, it's necessary, but after that, you have only a double page.
Yes, as I'm the initiator of the book, it's not about my voice. So it's, in a way, it's surprising that my voice is inside. But because I live in Brussels, I felt, okay, I have the agency to also say something about the city. While with other atlases, for instance, of Palestine and of Hungary, my voice is not inside. My voice is the book itself, is the concept, is the methodology, is the way of making it, or like what kind of communities to engage with. But in the case of Brussels, I did feel to also add a voice. But besides that, it's like, I forgot the amount, but I think it's around 80 people who are in Brussels from very various positions, backgrounds, who speak about their perspective. So it's not about all our favorite places, but it's really about, okay, what is your engagement with Brussels? What is your experience? And can you choose one particular thing that for you is really valuable, that for you makes Brussels? Take that perspective to visualize and to put it in perspective and to map that. And in this way, the whole book shows a plurality of voices of Brusselaars.
So maybe your story is not in the book then, but we are in the center, so that means something at least. But if you can write, now I'm generous, I give you 6 pages of the new edition of this book, then what part of the city would you write?
Yeah, to me, I would somehow put the center or the focus on the diversity of Brussels and the different communities, and also the self-organizing potential of the community. I admire that, and I think that is also really the strength of Brussels, like the different people who live here from all these different backgrounds. There's ways they can feel at home, and there's ways they can support each other, and I think that's really the absolute richness of Brussels. And also me, I'm also a foreigner here, like from the Netherlands, so more a neighbor than from very far away. But I find this really interesting, these different perspectives, and how that makes Brussels, and how here we are practicing living together. We are rehearsing another kind of future, and I encounter a lot of solidarity in Brussels, and I think that's something that I would really tribute to.
Yeah, you just mentioned that some people says that it's not really safe here and things like that. I think this is first because people are not really go into the deep causes of things. So I heard many times that, okay, Paris is, for example, is a dangerous city. You shouldn't go to Gare du Nord, for example. But I think it's just because you don't know what's happening, and there are other type of people everywhere. So here in Brussels, I think the mix is basically on the maximum level. You can find people from Morocco, from the US, from Germany, from the Netherlands, everywhere basically. And that's not happening, for example, in Ghent. In Ghent is mostly Flanders or more people. But in this way, maybe that was not your goal, but do you enhance a little bit this kind of communication between cultures as well?
Yes. So I'm a designer, and within my practice, I really focus on participative design projects that engage with social political struggles. And that's also really what I want to put my energy in. So in that sense, with my projects, another big project is a design label that I've co-founded, Disarming Design from Palestine. That was a result of making the Subjective Atlas of Palestine, which is really about sharing narratives of different lived experiences through designerly ways of doing. In the book, it's through alternative cartography, and in the design label, it's through artisanal products. And to see how can we better understand each other, better understand our different perspectives, different ways of living, by understanding, engaging with it. So in that sense, I do feel that my work is strongly engaging with the communication and engagement and solidarity between different communities, and how can we live together, and how can we live together better.
You now have a lot of editions, as just you mentioned. I have now 2 books, actually Palestine and Brussels, but you have about Amsterdam and other cities. If I'm, for example, I live in, let's name a small city, maybe in France, like Reims, it's not that far, and I want to make a book about Reims, for example, then what should I do?
Well, these kind of questions are more often posed, and this is how every book starts. So there's someone in a certain place, it can be a city, it can be a region or a country, and say, okay, I would like to map my environment. And so then we start to talk. And so what's important is that every atlas roots in such an initiative. It's not me taking the initiative, but it's people from different places that are rooted in certain communities and certain struggles that feel the urge to develop a counter-mapping book. Then we start to talk, and then I have developed over the years a methodology of how to do it. However, the local person who organized it has a lot of agency in the whole project, because it's this person who says, okay, actually this is the kind of discourse that we want to develop a counter-mapping for. These are the tensions in society that we feel there needs to be a different way of different perspectives, different narratives. It's these kind of communities whose voices are not heard enough, who we would like to engage in alternative mapping workshops. So we kind of map out, okay, what is the framing of the atlas, and then we need resources. So then it's also depends on, is this person able to find the resources? So we apply for funding. Maybe there's institutes, maybe there's in-kind funding for organizing the workshops. So it's a patchwork of setting the conditions for making it happen, and we have experience with that, so we also support, but there's really a local ownership in order to make that happen. And once that's secured, we start organizing workshops, and normally I give the first workshop, so to kind of set the tone and to express how do we see subjective mapping, how do we articulate it, what are the conditions within the design, and also to figure out together, like, how can we set the process, how can we organize the process on the best way. And then it's the local team who continues organizing workshops, and then there are certain conditions for, like, okay, how do we organize the material, and so in order to make it work for the book, and then often together with a local designer, we design the book, we edit the book, then we publish it under Creative Commons, so that also to stimulate that it reaches different kind of platforms, that it doesn't just stick in the book, but that it really, the images and narratives, that they distribute, and that there will be exhibitions or events, or that to really activate the content and the voices in the book.
I don't know why is it so interesting, but even for me, I took a lot of photos in the past in the neighborhood where I lived, and then when I saw that the city is changing and new houses coming, that's also kind of something what I wanted to document. And a lot of people doing that, basically. But here in Brussels, there are so many history and
yeah, it's like massive.
But also in Amsterdam and in London and so nearby Antwerp, needless to say. So there are many history. How can you put all this kind of history here to not have like a history book where you have 2,000 pages? I see a lot of pictures here, but also the text is kind of supporting, so it's not really long sometimes. So was that intentional?
Yes, yeah. So the book is really visual. So the visual is prior to the text. So the text works indeed as a supportive or as credits. Also, I think particularly in a city with so many cultures and ways of being, language sometimes often blocks us, or either we don't speak each other's language, or I have a different interpretation of language, or I am more verbal than somebody else. And the visual aspect really opens a different kind of domain, or a different kind of looking, or a different kind of making associations. And this is what this book focuses on, or really takes it as a tool of making, to how to put things visually in perspective. And the other thing is that what's important is that every page, more or less, is a different person. So it's about, okay, which communities are we inviting to contribute? And then the people have to put effort in their page. This choice of making this effort, of putting time in something, is also kind of a selection criteria. Like, what do you find which narrative is it worth for you to really put time in order to visualize it? And I think this kind of makes the selection in the book, that it's every perspective is something urgent or meaningful or critical for the person who visualized it or mapped it. And then also this atlas is called a subjective atlas, so there's no intention to be complete. It's completely transparent about the fact, okay, this is just a random group of people with a random group of perspectives. It's only 192 pages, so it's completely incomplete, but yet altogether it does touch on some kind of essence of what Brussels makes Brussels.
I just found my favorite. The daily route. Mm-hmm. So actually,
because it's recognizable for you.
I think a lot about what city is this when you work in the center, or when you work in the south, when you work in Zaventem, when you work on the west side. So I think it could be absolutely different. And for me, myself as well changed, because when I came here, I first went to the working place by car. And by car, Brussels is not really good.
It's terrible.
Mm-hmm. It's terrible, as you mentioned. But I realized that, okay, there is a train station next to me, so then I can go by train. And miraculously, there is a train station next to the working place. So it's already became calm. And then I realized that, okay, a lot of people go by bike. So how dependent are we on the surroundings and what the city offers to us?
We just talked about how difficult Brussels is for cars, because that really takes a lot of time, and it's also very pollutive. So I think we shouldn't use the car, or not in the city. However, I grew up in the Netherlands, so riding my bicycle is my second nature. But then also the infrastructure in the Netherlands for bicycles is quite well organized, and that was a surprise in Brussels, that you're on the bicycle lane and all of a sudden it stops. And you think, huh? And then another one, it stops. Or sometimes it's not there, sometimes it's there. So I had to figure out how to navigate on the bicycle. And also in the Netherlands, things are really flat, and here there's hills. Now I have an electric bicycle, and now it's fairly easy, but before it was sometimes a challenge to, sometimes it can be quite steep in Brussels. But I see on the bicycle things are faster than the car and even than public transport. So I think altogether we should ride a bicycle more often and take the walking more often and use less pollutive transportation means. But that's interesting in Brussels, how all these different neighborhoods have such a different identity. It's miraculous. And I think it's a wonder that Brussels functions. It doesn't function on many levels, and I think at the moment it's quite a disaster also that there's no government yet, and there's really severe problems. I shouldn't romanticize. But I think despite or with all these problems, that it functions, that we can move around, that the buildings are there, that we have water, there's garbage being picked up, like all these infrastructures, they do function.
What will be your next city?
Okay, so at this moment I'm working on 4 different new subjective atlases. So in 1 month the new number 15 comes out, which is a subjective atlas of Bosnia-Herzegovina. In the last 3 years we worked with different communities in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And this year is the 30th anniversary of the Dayton agreements. So this is also the moment that we will launch this atlas. I'm also working in Lubumbashi in Congo, together with Pitcha Art Center, who initiated this collaboration and wanted to have a subjective atlas of Lubumbashi. And so we're developing it, and that one will be published next year. Meanwhile, we're also working on a subjective atlas of Groningen, province, the most northern province in the Netherlands, really focusing on the province. And I'm working in the Philippines to make a subjective atlas of the Philippines. And this comes out in, I think, 1.5 years. Each of these atlases, there was someone approaching us, and then together having conversations and developing the framework. And each atlas is also with slightly different angles, different kind of communities, and there's different tensions in these different regions. But everywhere there's really local communities or local organizations who really take the responsibility for organizing this set of workshops, and then I offer more graphic and conceptual and methodological framework of how to work and how to develop this collaboration into a subjective atlas that we can publish together.
In Bosnia, in Bihać, actually, there is an art center called Krak.
Yeah.
And you can include that as well. It's very
interesting.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm sending it to the printer next week, the atlas. So the content is finished, but maybe we would love the atlas to be really activated, so to have exhibitions or to have events or to have connected workshops. And that's something that we're now setting up.
Thank you very much for the discussion.